Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, new paradigms for a new world where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here 9 times a week, Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at all those times at richarddugan.com. We are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, as well as YouTube, where you can watch these conversations. I hope that you will take time to subscribe and click notifications so that when a new conversation is posted, you'll be notified and you'll be able to tune in, listen in, and learn, be entertained and inspired. A reminder that Choices, which is my book, 5 Steps for Life, it's available on Amazon.com in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle with Audible, soon to be released. We also ask that if you can support the work that we are doing financially, we do have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And when they ask for an email address to whom you're sending, please go to richard@richarddugan.com. That's the email address. If you go to richarddugan.com, there is also a link directly to PayPal so that you can send us whatever support you can. And we thank you to those who have helped and to those who will help. We also ask that you take time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still, small voice. And with that, we now take you to our very special interview and guest here on Tell Me Your Story. Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and it is a pleasure to have with us here on the program a gentleman who's going to share with us his insights on many different levels with some of the experiences that he has gone through in his life through a book that he has just released, his memoirs. His name is Elio Zarmati, and he is the author of a book entitled Goodbye, and is it pronounced Tahrir? Tahrir.
Yes.
Goodbye, Tahrir Square. It's coming of age of a Jew of the Nile, and it's a poignant memoir that offers a timely exploration of identity, displacement, and the cyclical nature of history in the region. We're talking, of course, of the Middle East. Welcome to the program to Tell Me Your Story. I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you, Elio.
Same here. Thank you.
Your nation of origin, what is it?
Excuse me. It's a very complex one. I was born in Egypt of French, Italian, and Egyptian origin in a society that was the ultimate melting pot because there were very large European colonies in Egypt that had been there for many generations and that were expelled as a result of the Suez War, which took place between Egypt on one hand and France, England, and Israel on the other over the Suez Canal. I was 11 years old when that happened, and it was preceded by a revolution that basically ended the monarchy of King Farouk and installed a military coup in its place.
The one thing that comes to my mind when I think of the country of Egypt in particular goes back to the 70s and the Carter administration and the attempts on the part of Jimmy Carter to try to bring Egypt and Israel together with, I believe it was Menachem Begin and Anwar Sadat. And the sad outcome of it a few years later, certainly, I think Menachem Begin, he died of natural causes, but Sadat was assassinated.
Correct,
and,
yes.
And yet we had, and there were times as I got older in my into the 80s and early 90s, I got to thinking, what business is it of ours? Let them figure it out. Let them work it out. Leave them alone. They can determine their future for themselves. And I kind of feel the same way even today with what's happening now in the Middle East there and so forth. I don't know if Egypt has any role whatsoever in what's happening. I haven't heard anything in that regard. But the whole dynamic of the Middle East, and it seems as though, if I'm correct, Elio, that the dynamic, though it is surrounding land, territory that's sacred, it goes deeper than that to a spiritual aspect, correct?
Yes, it is. And it has become that. It started out as a territorial issue. Basically, Jews wanting a piece of the land that they considered historic, but instead of letting the people living there locally, Palestinians and Israelis, work it out, uh, the other Arab states got involved and made a complete mess of it. And that continues to this day. I mean, even the Suez War involved both the United States and what was then the Soviet Union. And so it was never left to the opponents on the ground to find a solution among themselves. And that's the tragedy of the Middle East.
Um, is your feeling, and we'll dive into your memoir here, which talks an awful lot about what is going on or what has gone on over the not just the decades, but quite literally the centuries. That different religious factions claim ownership of because of certain events that took place in those particular regions. And yet there's a part of me that thinks that this should have drawn them together. They all have a common bond in that regard to this region of the world, but unfortunately, that's not the case. Talk to us a little bit about, and obviously, we can't go into a huge depth here, but what is, may I ask, your particular, and I refer to them as philosophies, not so much religions, but the main ones that exist in that area are Christian, Jew, and Islam, and there may be some other factions that I am not familiar with. May I ask what your affinity to is?
Well, I'm Jewish. I was born in an Arab land. I've inherited both traditions of living in an Islamic country as well as having a faith that was a minority in that environment. Uh, as a child, I certainly was brought up with the idea that Israel was created for the Jews to go back to their homeland. One can dispute that, but that was the prevalent feeling. And there's a perception in the world, particularly in the United States, that Israel is a creation of Europe because the initial leaders of Israel were of European Jewish descent. But actually, there were people who lived in Palestine who were Jewish, had been there probably either left over from the Jews who emigrated with Moses way back when, or uh, people who came back later. But the current state of Israel has a majority of Jews from Arab lands, not Jews from Germany or Hungary or Poland. And so the perceptions on the Arab side is that they're occupiers, they don't belong there, they should be booted out. And the perception on the Israeli side is that you kicked us out of next door, basically, whether it was Egypt or Iraq or wherever. and we're here to stay. And there has been no amicable solution, in spite of the efforts of President Carter and others. Uh, the peace with Egypt is what I call a very cold peace.
Mm.
It is not uh, a happy one. It is somewhat forced by circumstances, but there is not a whole lot of love lost for Israel in Egypt, which had a very large Jewish community up to the Suez and the Six-Day War.
Mm.
So that's the situation. I am in a position now where uh, on one hand, I'm solidary with Israel because of the massacre of October the 7th. And at the same time, I am very much against the policies of the current Israeli government, which I think has taken the retribution far too far at the expense of innocence. And so basically, it's a source of pain for me on from both sides of my cultures.
Mm. I would say that yeah, you have a very difficult road to walk if you were a path to walk because you have your lineage, your even your biology it matters. It's split in that respect. So it's like you can't really take sides. You know, you can understand where the two factions in this case are coming from,
Absolutely.
but
And I think that uh, my position, like many others, I suppose, is particularly difficult because we were expelled from Egypt for being European and Jewish. And a big chunk of my family on my father's side has found refuge in Israel.
yeah.
So I have a family there that
Hmm.
I'm very, very concerned about.
Sure.
And at the same time, it's hard to condone the current policy of the Israeli government.
Well, we're not here. We're not going to solve those problems here. We're here, of course, to talk about your memoir. Where is and what is the significance of Tahrir Square?
Well, Tahrir Square is like the mall in Washington in a way. It's a central place in the heart of Cairo, which has been the place to go at any historical difficult time like wars and revolution. And this is where crowds congregated. There were up to over 1 million people in Tahrir Square. It's quite large. At the last revolution in 2011, uh, where people congregate. So on a larger scale, this is what it represents. It is the heart of Egypt. On a personal level, I lived very close to it. And my parents were divorced, and they each live at the other side of Tahrir Square in adjoining streets. And so Tahrir Square were a place where I walked every day of my life in Egypt, either visiting one parent or the other, or taking the bus to school or the tramway, whatever. So it's a very special personal place as well as
Mm.
a very large place in the history of Egypt.
And when you have this title saying goodbye, Tahrir Square, you are leaving Egypt. Have you been back often at all?
No, not at all, actually. For one thing, politically, I wasn't allowed to go back for, and until Carter made a peace possible between Israel and Egypt, I wasn't welcome to come back. And since then, it's been, of course, quite a while. I have feared going back, not so much for any kind of personal jeopardy, but simply because It's a totally different country now. It's a seriously Islamic country, and everything that I knew as a child, as part of a both Jewish and European tradition, is gone. It's just not there anymore. Uh,
Mm,
and so I did not want to spoil the uh, positive feelings that I have about the Egypt I knew
yeah.
by seeing a country that's totally devastated by poverty and by the influence of religion that is not faithful to its basic philosophy.
Mm. Elio Zarmati is my guest, and as I mentioned, the title of the book, Goodbye, Tahrir Square. We are talking about his life. This is his memoir. We certainly hope that you will go to his website. Zarmati.com is the website, ZARMATI.com. We encourage you to go there, go to Amazon as well, and we certainly hope that you'll get a copy of his book through Amazon as well. Again, the title of the book is Goodbye, Tahrir Square. And we hope that you'll stay with us here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, and it is really a pleasure to speak with the gentleman we have with us here on the program today, Elio Zarmati, and his book, Goodbye, Tahrir Square. It has to do with the coming of age as a Jew of the Middle East, or of the Nile, I should say. It's a poignant memoir, and we hope that you'll get yourself a copy at Amazon. I wanted to ask you a little bit about some of and I want to. It sounds kind of strange to start here. I'd like for you, if you could, to address especially from the context of your book, some of the misconceptions and misunderstandings, or downright, I don't want to say falsehoods per se, but just flat out inaccuracies that the West has about the Middle East, about Israel, about Judaism, Islam, about that region of the world. I have to tell you that for a period of time in the 90s, I actually associated with and became and was for about a year and a half a Baha'i, and they have their international house of international house. I can't remember the rest of this in Haifa, Israel. It seems
It's
as yeah, and it
it,
seems as though many of the religions, the philosophies of the world, somehow they have their roots in that part of the world, the Middle East. And people, Christians, obviously, because of Jesus and his crucifixion and his burial and his life and times and so forth. Obviously, with Islam and Muhammad, and Israel and the 12 tribes, or I don't know, maybe there are 13. But can you share with us and put us on the right track so we can better understand and maybe have sort of like what you have? Because I'd rather have the dilemma of not wanting to pick sides, but wanting to be compassionate with all parties involved.
absolutely.
How can you help us to better understand what what you have been dealing with for many, many years?
That's a very complex issue. Before I begin, I want to tell you that the grounds of the Baha'i Temple in Haifa is one of the most beautiful places on earth.
I would love to go.
It is
Mm,
absolutely a magical place in the spiritual realm
hmm
that is absolutely remarkable. And it was the first time I went to Israel was on a cargo ship. And the first thing that comes to view when you approach uh, is the golden roof of the Baha'i temple, the golden dome that is
Mm,
absolutely a dream. Uh, well, you put your finger on the dilemma itself, is that it's the birthplace of three religions, uh, and everybody is attached to it as its place of origin. And unfortunately, the violence of our nature has made it a battlefield for all the religions, and so it's very hard to deny the right of others to this land because they worship it in the same way as your people do. Uh, and at the same time, if you're under attack, you have to defend yourself. So you're basically in an unsolvable dilemma being there. There was a time when my parents' generation, where there was a relative peace there. I mean, my father had told me stories about taking the morning train in Cairo and landing in Jerusalem in the afternoon and visiting people, friends there, and that animosity was not always present. It was present in the times of the Crusades or at various other times where there has been war between the current occupiers, the Crusaders, or Egypt has been occupied by a variety of empires through its history, and so was the Holy Land. So it's a knot that you cannot solve one way or another. The only possibility is peace, and we're very far from that right now.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was saying, the peace with Egypt is uh, a cold peace. It is not a union of any kind. There is no the participation is of each country in the borders and whatnot is something forced by circumstances, but not willingly done. They're enemies.
Yeah. I used to think as a child, an older child, maybe not quite into my teen years, and of course, back in the late '60s, early '70s, we heard all of these different conflicts going on around the world, and especially in the Middle East. And my first thought was, I don't understand. I mean, we all shed the same red blood. How is it that we have all this? And of course, that's coming from a child's perspective. But even as an adult, I'm sitting here going, wait a minute, we all shed the same red blood. And unfortunately, we're seeing an awful lot of it. Not getting into specifics politically, okay? Do you have any illusions at all whatsoever that the current administration here in 2025 is going to have any success in trying to bring about any kind of lasting peace? Or should we get the hell out, leave you folks alone? And when I say you folks, the Israelis and the Palestinians and the Egyptians and the Iranians and the Iraqis and so on and so on. Get out of there, leave you alone, and let you guys figure it out.
Well, I mean, ideally, in a perfect world, yes. Uh, in fact, the affairs of the world are so intricately woven together that it's impossible. There hasn't been a war where the powers in the 19th century, the imperial powers of France and Great Britain, currently, actually, since the Suez War, the United States versus the Soviet Union, now Russia. Uh, it has never been a place where the locals could work it out among themselves by war or peace. It's the nature of this world that there is an imperial function that makes the great powers fight each other through smaller entities. And so I don't know that it would be possible for what you describe as as I don't think it's possible. Nobody is gonna take their hands out of the Middle East, and I'm afraid that no administration, this one or any previous one, could have changed that. I mean,
Mm.
it has to be resolved on a global level, and right now we're as far as ever
Hmm.
from that possibility, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I know that they have this clock, and they update it I think every year. I think they called it the Doomsday Clock. And my understanding is it moved ahead a couple of seconds into 2025. I still hold out hope. I'm optimistic that we can figure it out. We can work it out, whether it be the Middle East, whether it be Southeast Asia, China, Russia, whatever the area is that's having conflict. I still am optimistic that we can solve some of these issues and begin to realize that it's all of us or none. It's either
I
we're all going to make it or we're going to, unfortunately,
Absolutely.
as
I
some. Go
totally
ahead.
agree with you. I
Yeah,
mean, but it's the fight between the mind and the heart.
yeah.
The heart wants that peace
Hmm.
to take place, and the mind is showing that there are a lot of obstacles. And are we able to resolve them? I hope so.
Yeah. I want to talk to you about some other areas as well as we continue. We're talking with Elio Zarmati and talking about his memoir that is available via Amazon. His website, by the way, is zarmati.com, ZARMATI.com. The book is entitled Goodbye, Tahrir Square, Coming of Age as a Jew of the Nile, here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, along with Elio Zarmati. And first of all, it is really a pleasure to have an opportunity to speak with you about some of these subjects. I am by no means, I would never, ever presume to have any answers to any of the questions that I am asking you in terms of this life and the life that you have lived and gone through, the experiences that you have. And it's really an unfortunate thing that anybody, I mean, I see the things on the news over the years and I'm going, I don't know. Thank goodness I have never been. Now this is now Mother Nature here. I've never been burned out. I've been threatened by a dozen or 16 fires in the 18 years I've lived here on the South Coast. I've never been a migrant. I've never been a refugee. I don't know what that must be like. And I hope to God I never have to go through that. But yet there are millions of people around the world today who have no place to call home. We're not talking about a structure. We're talking about a place that they can say, this is a place that I can settle in. I can raise a family. I can I can live out the life's purpose that I want to. And I think that's one of the things that always comes to mind when I hear about these conflicts, is the lost potential of each of these human beings and what they might have contributed to our society and civilization if they had lived, if they had not had to fight, and as some people say, give the ultimate sacrifice. It seems as though, Ilio, that the soul of a nation. I'm curious, have you ever looked at it from that perspective? And in terms of the soul, the heart of a nation, like Egypt, like Israel, and I'm going to use the term, like Palestine in terms of, say, the Gaza Strip. But it's a people that makes up a nation. And where their heart is, where their soul is.
Well, that's the toughest question in the world, because these places exist in the heart of people, but it's not an accepted reality for the people in power at any given time. Today, it's Israel, but Before it, it was Great Britain, and even within the Arab world, after the Suez War, basically Egypt annexed Gaza, Jordan annexed the West Bank. I mean, there's always somebody wanting to rule those essential places, and the people who live there don't never had the power to rule themselves. When that happened, in the case of Israel and in the case of the West Bank gaining a small measure of autonomy, that was immediately challenged by war terrorists and whatnot. So that fundamental aspiration to be safe in your homeland is something that is constantly denied to somebody on Earth, some people, some groups on Earth at all times, whether it's the Uyghurs or you name it. I mean, there's always somebody oppressing somebody else. And it's the most unfortunate thing in the Middle East because everybody involved has a right to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Palestinians were born in the Holy Land and have as much right as any Christian who wants the Messiah to come back, or I mean, any combination you want to apply.
Mm-hmm.
Jews and Arabs have the right to that land, and they have to find a way to share it. And in my lifetime, it hasn't happened.
Yeah.
I don't know if it will happen for the rest of my life, however long that may be.
Yeah. Elio Zarmati is my guest. We're talking about his book, Goodbye Tahrir Square, and you are listening to Tell Me Your Story. One of the things I want to talk to my guest, Elio Zarmati, about his book and his memoirs, Goodbye Tahrir Square, has to do with this aspect that you were alluding to just a moment ago. Which, from your perspective, your personal perspective, because you have, I know that you don't really have a dog in this fight, and yet you do. You have two, and they're competing, so to speak. They're competing dogs in this fight, if you will. How much more important is it to have a piece of land you can call home, no matter where it is on the planet, versus having a homeland that you want to declare by some ancient deed or mortgage that has been paid over the centuries that is basically causing this conflict? Because I do understand at some level. I wish I had a home that I mean, yes, my mother and my sisters live in Phoenix. So yes, I do have a hometown, but it's not my home anymore. Not only because I live here in Santa Barbara, but because it's nothing like it was when I was a child growing up. So now my home is in the 2-room cottage that my wife and I live with our animals here on the mountaintop above Santa Barbara, California. And I'm good with that. However, if you're a Jew, if you're an Arab, if you're a Palestinian, you're an Israeli, apparently the land that you occupy with the history that it has is more important, at least that's my observation, than going somewhere else on the planet and finding a place where you can have peace and quiet and raise a family and do the things you want to do. Is that a misunderstanding on my part, and or is it a paradox that's part of the challenge of all parties involved?
It's the ultimate paradox. In my case, I lost my initial home, but I've had several temporary homes over my life since I lost the initial home. I grew up in France and in Paris and in London. I spent my professional life in California, in Los Angeles, and they're all my homes. And at the same time, I could not tell you what is my base, what is my real home, because my real home has been destroyed.
Do you
The
feel like a
Cairo,
refugee?
I'm sorry?
Do you feel like a refugee?
Yes, and I've been a fortunate one because I wasn't an economic refugee. I was a child without means, but I didn't live in a refugee camp, or there's so many different degrees in contained in the word refugee. So yes, we had refugee status in France initially, and then I came here as an immigrant. Uh, but at that time, I was married to an American woman who's still a dear friend, and so I was welcome here. I was not in the category of undesirables. And so it's just so complex that there is no proper definition to what it is. But homeless is the word for all of us, refugees of every kind, political or otherwise. Uh, it's the feeling that you belong nowhere and a little bit everywhere, but mostly nowhere.
I would venture that the people of Los Angeles, after the raging fires that swept through certain areas, probably have that same sense of displacement because they're not living in the place where they called home. I mean, the stories, of course, abound about where they used to live and the house they were in, and it was their parents or their grandparents, and the neighborhood and the people in that neighborhood were so wonderful. And now it kind of looks an awful lot like the Gaza Strip
Well,
or in
that,
years gone by, Lebanon and so forth.
yes, absolutely. Well, it's interesting because for a short while, my house was a refugee camp. I had friends who had to evacuate from Pasadena and elsewhere who stayed with us. And that feeling that they still had a home, but it was uninhabitable, that it had been
Mm.
taken over by the elements is absolutely a horrendous feeling, which I could share vicariously because I've been there.
Yeah. And I'm curious, you say that you've sort of, from time to time, found a place you call home. Is there any opportunity whatsoever for you to ever return to your home, even if it is just to visit? Because I would venture that the house, the structure that you grew up in, specifically, let's say in Egypt, not far from Tahrir Square, may be occupied, may not even be there anymore, for all we know. But is there any opportunity at all for you ever to return, even if it is just for a visit, as opposed to
Yes,
moving back there?
as a visit, I'm definitely now interested. In spite of the climate that exists since the Gaza war. I have, as I said earlier, I haven't wanted to go back for years because I maybe I thought unconsciously I knew that I wanted to write a book about that Egypt, and going back to see it become a different country altogether is something I did not want to subject myself to. But now I'm really curious to reconnect with that part of my life,
Mm,
maybe because the book had writing that book had a healing effect on me.
mm.
I it made me reconcile with my childhood, um, And so I would love to go back. I don't speak much Arabic anymore. I've spent half an entire life away from those roots. But it would be a good experience, but it will never be home again. That I know.
Yeah.
It's the world in the Middle East is not at all the world of my childhood. It's very different. Back then, there were a million Jews in Arab lands, and uh, there wasn't that hatred that set out probably since the creation of the State of Israel that was rejected by the entire Arab world. Um, and so it would be a very uncomfortable place, to say the least.
Mm. Elio Zarmat's my guest. I'm Richard Dugan. We're talking about the Middle East from a lot of different perspectives in regards to his memoir, which is entitled Goodbye, Tahrir Square, here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan along with Elio Zarmati, and zarmati.com is the website we would love you to go to. Go to amazon.com as well. Get a copy of Goodbye, Tahrir Square. I wanted to ask you, you sort of alluded to this a little bit in terms of reconciling your childhood in terms of the writing of this book. I want to go maybe a little broader in that in terms of the reason why you thought now was the time to write this, that now is the time to release it, to share it with the general public. And to me, it makes perfect sense from your standpoint because you have this split, if you will, being a Jew, but also being raised in both of those cultures. So you have a better understanding than most about this. So what was the impetus behind your feelings that I need to tell my story and it needs to be heard now?
And yeah, it's a dual thing. One was just being in Los Angeles in 2011, watching the revolution happening on television, knowing the places intimately, was an extraordinary experience that made me want to share my own experience.
Mhm.
And that is from the point of view of someone who is made to feel like you don't belong in your land of birth.
Mhm.
And so I remember, and there's a passage in the book where I realize watching the celebration once the Egyptian people got rid of Pharaoh Mubarak, who was a sort of modern Pharaoh. Uh, that I wouldn't be welcome in their celebration, even though I was just as happy about it as all the people on Tahrir Square were. Yet, if I came to join them, they would question my presence because I don't belong in the very place where I was born and lived for a chunk of my life. Uh, the other consideration was on a higher political, social level, is that the history of that part of the Middle East has gone, is almost forgotten. Whenever I speak with, I was active in all sort of peace movements and talking to young Arabs in Los Angeles or New York or in America in general. They know nothing about anything that precedes the existence of Israel. They don't know how Jews and Arabs have coexisted for 20 centuries at the very least, in some kind of non-harmonious peace, but peace nonetheless. I mean, there are always pogroms here and there, whatnot, but basically, one of the most glorious time of history was Islamic Spain, where Jews, Christians, and Muslims collaborated in inventing algebra and advanced the sciences. They don't know anything about that.
Mm.
They only know a divided, fragmented world in which the other is the enemy, period. And I thought that by showing them what the world was before 1948 or 1956 or whatever might be beneficial. And so the ignorance is absolutely remarkably high.
I would say that runs very high here in the US as well. We think we understand, we think we know, we don't have a clue as to what's been going on there over the centuries, let alone over the last century, the 20th century into the 21st. And we want to go in there and try to fix it, try to make it better. Unfortunately, our ulterior motives are glaring. You know, we're not there because we care about these people. As far as governments are concerned, has nothing to do with that we care. I mean, the latest proposal that I heard in terms of turning the Gaza Strip into something that it has no business being because it's none of our business what it's going to be created into. And yet there we are, you know, and there always seems to be an ulterior motive. Instead of, could we just tell the truth? Could we just be honest for a change? I don't know about you, but I've lived by this particular philosophy when it comes to governments. If you have no secrets to keep, then you have no secrets to keep. And as long as we continue to keep secrets, this kind of horseplay is going to continue to go on, and it's going to cost lives in countless generations. And that's the saddest. That's the saddest part of all. And I go back to what I said earlier about the lost potential. The lost potential. What could these people have contributed? What other lives might they have created? You know, bringing forth, you know, new birth, new children, and so forth, who might actually make a difference in this world. I'm going to continue as you to stay optimistic as well. I want to ask you about, because I'd love for you to clarify just a little bit more, and you've probably done quite a bit of it already. This reconciling with your childhood as you wrote this book, a healing process. Could you go a little deeper into that?
Sure. Uh, well, the position I had had always been one of affection for Egypt, for the wonderful things it offered me as a child, the closeness of my family, the presence of history at every corner of the city you walk in. I mean, there's always, you know, there have been the pharaohs, you know that Joseph of the many-colored coat was there. You live in a world of history. I mean, the monuments are everywhere to show the grandeur of ancient Egypt, in which the Jews had a part, uh, uh, starting with Joseph and going on to recent times. And at the same time, I have had more than have now, but a tremendous sense of rejection because my people, that side of me, expelled me, rejected me, told me I don't belong there. And that's a sort of pain that I have tried to ignore, managed to create a life without it being at the core of my being. But it was always present. And that feeling was totally accentuated by watching the 2011 revolution, saying, my heart belongs with these people, but I don't think they want me there.
Mm.
And so I needed to make peace with all those conflicting, rather painful feelings. I mean, who I am today is based on who I was as a child Jewish European in an Arab country. It is who I am today, although my life is just as American as yours in terms of daily life and whatnot.
Yeah.
And I feel profoundly American because that's, in my view, what America is, the ultimate refuge, the place where you can rebuild yourself. And it's veering away from that image, but it's still there.
Yeah. I
Uh,
uh, I think about that as you speak in regards to the words that were probably on the tip of the tongue of most anybody that came across to Ellis Island back at the turn from the 19th to the 20th centuries, and that was that it's the land of opportunity.
and it
And
is.
yeah, and you have turned your life into something that, my goodness, I mean, you're a publisher, a screenwriter, a television director, and the list goes on of some of the. I mean, you're living in the right place, Los Angeles. There's no question about it. In the heart
Absolutely.
of the entertainment capital of the world, as it were. Um, can you share with us a little bit about how that came about, and have you done projects? I'm sure you've probably done some in regards to this whole issue that may actually sort of kind of go along with your memoir here of Goodbye, Tahrir Square.
Well, unfortunately, not very much. I did a couple of short films when I started in the film business in France, in Paris, and particularly a short film about the nonsense of the Six-Day War. So that was in 1967. I mean, 69, a year after the 67, 2 years after the 67 war. And but since then, the opportunity hasn't come about. I mean, a lot of the movies that I wrote that were not produced had to do with an intimate story, a love story or a story of loss or whatever, in a larger political conflict, whether it was World War II or the Vietnam War or whatever. I mean, that's been the theme of my life in a lot of ways. And one of the reasons I decided that I'd had it with movies is that I wasn't allowed to develop those things. All the projects regarding this were not produced after being bought and developed and all the usual Hollywood routines. Um, and so this is what I want to do now for whatever is left of my life, is write about that experience. My next book is a love story between a Jewish man and an Egyptian and an Arab Egyptian woman. I mean, it is what I can do now, but in the marketplace, there was no demand for that. And that's been, I mean, I've made a living writing other stuff, uh, but the things that I really wanted to do did not interest Hollywood, uh,
Yeah,
the Hollywood crowd.
yeah.
That's what it is.
And yet, at the same time, the way that things are disseminated these days, there are so many different outlets that. But again, you do need the financial backing, and if there's nobody there, then it's kind of hard to put them out. It's for the general public to see and hear. I'm hoping one day you do get a chance to produce, and hopefully we might even see you here in Santa Barbara at our International Film Festival that's held in February every year.
Oh, yeah,
And
I know it well.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
I
also
used to have a cabin in the San Ynez Valley just above Santa Barbara. And so Santa Barbara is familiar ground to me.
Well, I hope that one day, because I know you also inhabit an area in Ojai, or at least that's one of the places that's listed here. And
Yes.
if you ever find yourself in Santa Barbara, please look me up. I would love to meet you in person and chat a little further about this. It it's sad because it's sad that you're writing this, you're talking about this other book about a relationship between a Jew and a Muslim, and it's like love doesn't care. You know,
Absolutely.
when it kicks in, it doesn't care. My father, he was, I believe, he was raised basically Protestant. I don't remember which sect it was, but he was raised Protestant. My mother was raised Catholic, and my father chose to convert to Catholicism so that they would raise their children in that fashion. But even as they grew, they said, "No, organized religion. We've had enough because of the shenanigans that were going on in the 80s and the 90s into the 2000s, even today." So they were still, my father, before his passing, he told me, he says, "I still believe in God. I just don't believe in organized religion." And so everybody seems that they need to find their own way. And it seems as though you've done that. Is there some kind of mixture of, I don't want to, well, in terms of your religious life, is there some kind of mixture that you celebrate, that you worship, that you recognize a divine creator, a being, et cetera, and show um, your allegiance, so to speak, in
Well,
terms of your life?
it's that's a very, very interesting question because I grew up, you know, when I was a student in Egypt, the French schools where I went to closed as a result of the Suez War, and I went to Jesuit school to another Catholic school as well. And so I grew up with three religions,
Wow.
within my knowledge, my area, and having uh, both rejecting all three and embracing all three at various times of my growth. And I'm married to a Christian woman, uh, uh, and we celebrate everything.
Hmm.
We celebrate Hanukkah and Christmas and the Muslim Eid, Mubarak Day, and all these things. We find a reason to celebrate everything.
Mm.
And so I don't go to any establishment, synagogue or church or anything, but the spirit of these three religions is totally anchored in my soul.
Wow.
And so
Wow. That's
that's the way.
that's beautiful. That's
Thank you.
beautiful. The founder of the Baha'i faith, Baha'u'llah, said once, if you reject one of the messengers of God, you reject them all. If you accept one of them, you accept them all. And I love that phrasing. It doesn't mean that you have to change your religion. If you're Catholic, you don't need to become a Jew or a Muslim or a Buddhist or whatever other philosophy that is out there. All it says is that you recognize that there's value in what's being said from all of the different directions that one can go, and that's beautiful. That is so beautiful. I want to thank you for giving us this time here on the program to talk about the work that you have created that folks can get a copy of via Amazon.com. And it is Goodbye Tahrir Square. It is the coming of age as a Jew of the Nile. It's a poignant memoir, and I hope that you folks will get a copy of it. You can find out more about Elio, and you can go to his website, which is Zarmati.com, Zarmati.com. Then we hope that you will. Is your book available in Audible?
Not yet, but they're planning on releasing that. But right now, it's not announced.
Wonderful. I would love to. I'm a member of the Amazon Audible Society, so to speak, listening to books online, and it's there's just something, and I still refer to it to people. I said, no, you're still reading. Yeah, you are listening. You're reading with your ears, okay?
Yes, absolutely.
And if you have the right narrator, boy, I tell you, it is quite a treat. I hate to end a book. because I become so connected to the narrator and their voice, and they become a part of my life. They're a friend, that kind of thing, as well as, of course, the author too. So
Absolutely.
it's
And
a
one of the joys is revisiting books every 10 years or 15 years, rereading it and reacquainting with those dear friends.
well, I've been recommending for the last 30 years a book to people that I actually originally got on cassette. I never actually had the book in my hand, and it was by an Israeli author by the name of Goldratt. And he wrote a book called The Goal. And I found it once again on Audible, and it's exactly the same dramatization. And it basically says to me, it says, just because we've always done it that way, does that mean that it still works, that we have to continue to do it that way? And it's a great story. It really is. And like I said, I was sad to end the book, but I can always go back and listen again.
Absolutely.
It's really,
Absolutely.
it's really very cool. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us, Elio. And I have three final questions that I ask all of my guests.
Sure.
And I want to ask those of you now, but I want to first thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, where we are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday at 8 a.m., streaming live at all of those times at richarddugan.com with podcasts on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music. And we are also on YouTube where you can watch these conversations and get to know us a little bit better as well. And I hope you'll subscribe and click notification so when I put up a new conversation, you will be notified. Choices, 5 Steps for Life, is also available at Amazon.com in hardcover, paperback, and Kindle with Audible. On its way, folks. It's on its way. And we also ask if you like the work that we're doing here, you'd like to be a part of it, and you'd like to support us financially, we would be gratefully appreciative. We have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And we thank you in advance for those who have helped and for those who will help. And finally, we ask that you take some time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, and go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still small voice. I think that my guest would agree that if the powers that be would just do a little bit more of that, we might actually solve some of the conflicts and the issues that we have between the various factions on the planet if we would just stop and listen. With all of that being said, I ask my guests of these three questions. The first in this case is, who is Elio Zarmati?
Many things, too many things, perhaps. Um, I'm a writer first and foremost, but in my life, I've been a journalist, a film director, a screenplay writer, a translator. I mean, I've done every job there is to do to survive when you're young immigrants. Um, and now I have the pleasure of just writing, not needing to do any other work.
Mhm.
And I'm enjoying every minute of it.
What gets you up in the morning?
A cup of tea and just wanting to go to my office and write or read or both. It's one of the great pleasures of life, and I owe that to my father, who raised me on classics, French and English. These were my the books that were my nighttime stories, and I'm enjoying it every minute right now.
And finally, what was your best day?
Ah, I'll say yesterday. I had a damn good day yesterday. I did quite a bit of work. I also enjoyed the rain, which we have right now in Los Angeles, which is a rare, rare thing. And I'm getting on in age, and being alive and relatively healthy is one of the biggest gifts in the world, and I love it.
Well, Elio, I thank you again for joining us here on the program. Continued success, much success with this book, Goodbye Tahrir Square. We hope that people will get a copy of it, and I hope that we get a chance once again to converse about these subjects and talk more in that regard, and maybe even have a chance to meet here in Santa Barbara someday.
That would be lovely. That
All
would
right.
be terrific.
Well, again, I thank you, and I thank you folks for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story: New Paradigms for a New World. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to Lal. Jeanette, I am still listening. Dad, continue to be happy because I am. Smokey, I'll see you on the other side. Mike, I am so glad you were in my life. And to my dear friend Zorro, aho, aho.